Hi, Joe.
Hi.
My name is Christina. I'm going to be your counselor.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. So before we get our session, I just want to talk about informed consent and confidentiality. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so basically what informed consent means is that you have the right to know what's going on in regards to your therapy. So this paperwork covers my qualifications, fees, billing, contact information, and the limits of confidentiality.
Okay.
So in regards to confidentiality, what we discuss in this room will stay in this room.
Sure.
I'm not going to go off and speak about, the things we've discussed to other people.
Right.
The only time that I do need to breach confidentiality is if I think that you are, a harm to yourself or a harm to others.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if you don't mind just signing this for me.
Sure.
And as you know, I practice reality therapy. So as an RT counselor, it's a little bit different than, things you might have heard about or experienced in the past. Did you have any questions about it before we began our session?
So I did look it up a little bit before I came in this week.
That's great.
But I did have some questions about the quality world. Some of the lingo they use I wasn't familiar with.
Okay.
Can you just kind of talk me through what a quality world is and
Sure.
what it does for you?
Yeah, so I'm just going to give you a brief, synopsis of what the quality world is. So basically in RT, we believe that it's formed, a little bit after you're born,
Okay.
and it's kind of this world of wants and
Sure.
these mental images. So experiences you want to have, people that you want to have in your life, things
Okay.
that you would like to, see in your life, and these mental images are kind of just like your quality experience and the
Okay.
things that you would like to have in your
Okay.
life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, does that kind of stay with you throughout your whole life, or does it change as you grow up?
So that's a great question. So with the quality world, it does grow with you. So as you change and adapt and experience new things in life, as a person, it's going to grow with you.
Okay.
You will have it throughout your life, but it's definitely going to grow with you as
Great.
you mature as a person.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
So to start things off, tell me a little bit about yourself and what brought you here today.
Sure. So I am a janitor at the local high school. I graduated from college about 3 or 4 years ago, and
Okay.
I couldn't find a job. So I took a job as a janitor. I'm kind of, I feel like I'm kind of stuck in this position. I like the people I work with,
That's great.
but there's kind of no upward mobility
Okay.
in that job. A little bit about me, though. I love sports.
Okay.
Any sport I love to watch, professional sports. However, kind of what brought me in today is I feel like I love sports almost a little bit too much, and I've been spending a lot of time gambling,
Okay.
to the point where, my friends have been commenting on it and things like that.
Okay.
So I kind of think that I need to talk about that a little bit. That's why I came in.
Okay. So just to recap, you're a janitor at the local high school. You did graduate from college, so you have a degree. What was your degree in?
Communications.
Okay. And, you said that you love sports, you have great friends at work, but you feel as if, maybe there isn't room for you to grow in your profession. Does that sound right? Okay, so talk to me a little bit more about, that gambling you were talking about, which is what brought you in today.
So I, pretty much any professional sport that you can think of, I've bet on.
Okay.
I've spent, I think, this month about half my paycheck on different gambling websites.
Okay.
It's kind of become a problem where I feel like it's kind of controlling a little bit more of my life than I want it to. That's never good.
Right. Okay. So going off of what you said, thank you for sharing. In RT, we believe that we have 5 basic human needs. So these are survival, love, power, freedom, and fun. From what I've gained from what you've told me, that you are kind of looking for that power and that fun. Does that sound right? Okay. So, as humans, we, participate in behaviors that make us feel good, and we understand when things don't make us feel good. So, we, in regards to the power aspect, we want to feel appreciated and recognized. Does that make sense?
Right.
And in regards to the fun aspect, the good thing is that fun can be satisfied in so many ways. For you right now, it might be online gambling, but for someone else, it could be something completely different.
Right.
So each human kind of experiences these needs in different ways.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, moving on before we continue with our session, I would love for us to set up some goals.
Okay.
You have mentioned what brought you to therapy today, but kind of expanding on that more. So what is something that you would like to get from counseling?
So I really like to, stop this gambling. It's turned into a problem, so I'd like to stop this gambling problem. Find other ways to, work through that. As well as, I'm trying to think, what would be a good goal? Could you suggest something maybe? Because I'm kind of struggling to come up with
Sure.
one.
So you mentioned earlier that in regards to the power aspect, I guess that you work as a janitor, but you did receive a college degree,
Right.
and there's no upward mobility in that
Right.
profession
Oh,
for
right,
you.
right. So maybe a good goal, would be for me to, maybe apply to apply to a job in the communications field.
Okay.
You know, we live close enough to New York City where I can commute. So it really wouldn't change my lifestyle that much. So I think that might be good goals to apply to a couple jobs.
Yeah, those are some great goals to begin with. I definitely think that those are going to help you kind of throughout our sessions. When you mentioned that you would love to stop gambling, I just want to bring in a piece from RT theory, and it's called choice theory. Did you read a little bit about that or no?
A little bit, not as much as I would like to.
Okay, so basically what choice theory means is that, we always have a choice in life. And in RT, we believe that we have the power to choose everything that we want to do in our lives. So we can stray from habits such as blaming, complaining, criticizing, and instead we could be supportive and responsible for things like that. So, I mean, coming here in the first place is already a step in that correct direction.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's just something to keep in mind throughout our sessions.
Sure.
So I'm glad that we set up some goals and we kind of talked a little bit about yourself. How do you feel about me assigning you a homework assignment?
I'll do it. I'll try my best to do it.
Okay, that's fine. So I would love for you to just take a look at choice theory. It's from Glasser, who's the founder of RT, and positive addiction, which is also something that he written. I think positive addiction will definitely, be interesting for you. I don't expect you to read both of them in their full.
And they're both books?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll be providing them for you. But, I think positive addiction you'd really learn a lot from, and then we can kind of talk about that in our next session. How does that sound?
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice meeting you, and I'll see you next week.
Awesome.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
You too. How was your week?
It was good. How was yours?
Good, thanks.
Okay. So before we get into our next session, I quickly wanted to talk about termination.
Sure.
So obviously, at some point, our sessions will end.
Right.
But this is just kind of to bring up the fact that I'm always going to be here for you if you need me. You have my contact information and how to schedule appointments. In RT, we usually try and have about a max of 12 sessions, but obviously each client is different. So like I mentioned, if you do need something, this is just a reminder that my door is always open.
Great.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So tell me a little bit about the books you read and your homework.
So I was not as good as my homework as I wanted to be.
That's okay.
I definitely read most of Positive Addiction, and I got a lot out of it.
Good.
It's kind of showed me the difference between positive and negative addiction. And how, doing something that's good for me, and getting addicted to that can, fill that fun void in my life, which we talked about last week.
Right.
And also can also replace the negative addiction in my life, which I would say, I'm probably pretty close to being addicted to gambling.
Okay.
So, finding something that I like to do could be really helpful for me.
Yeah.
And I think it could really benefit my life and my lifestyle.
That's great. Well, thank you for, completing your assignments. I'm glad that you got a lot out of it. And, just keep, that information that you just shared with me in your mind, through our sessions. So I want to kind of go back a little bit to what RT is all about. So here in RT, we believe that we want to focus on the present.
Okay.
And that by focusing on the present, we have a greater chance of reaching our goals. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we don't really want to dwell on that, like I mentioned. So in regards to the goals that we set last week, and the things that you've expressed, I think it would be really beneficial for us to create an action plan.
Okay.
So how does that sound?
Good. I'm excited.
Good? Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess the first thing that I'd like to know is, do you think that your current actions are effective in your life in regards to, I guess, your gambling and then, the power that you have at work?
No.
Okay.
I kind of feel like at work, I do, good work, but there's no way for me really to move up in the near future.
Right.
And also, I get angry when I spend too much money gambling and I don't have money to do things that I want to do. Like, all my friends took a vacation last year, and I couldn't go because, I didn't have the money because I spent it on gambling, and I lost it in gambling. So, they really aren't working out the way that I'd like them to be.
Okay. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So the purpose of the action plan is kind of to make simple and attainable goals. I don't want, you to completely quit, the things that you're doing this week, but these are just things that are attainable.
Okay.
So what would you say are 2 things that, we could set in your action plan?
Maybe started applying for jobs.
Okay.
Just looking, I do have a degree in communications, and I really think that's where my passion is.
Okay.
So maybe looking for some entry-level communications jobs.
Okay.
We live close enough to New York City where I can commute from here, so it's really something that I think I could do if I could find a job.
Okay. So how many, job searches would you like to complete this week?
Maybe 2.
2? Okay.
Yeah.
And then what is another, something else that you'd like to put in your action plan?
So the Final Four for March Madness is this weekend. So, I have my bracket already made, but maybe not spending additional money gambling on those games. So kind of just watching and I already have, like I said, my bracket, so I'm not spending additional money on that.
Okay, so monitoring kind of your usage this
Right.
week and being, noticing those things that you are doing. I think those are attainable goals for sure, and I'm excited to see how they work out for you. Something that I want you to keep in mind, since we've gone over your goals and the action plan, is that there's no guarantee in RT's perspective that life is fair. And, the only thing that you can do is control yourself, your behaviors, your actions, your thoughts, your feelings. And this kind of goes back to choice theory, which is something that we use in RT, which means that basically you can choose everything that you want to do. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that things might not always be fair, but you have control of your situation. Sure. So I just want you to keep that in mind, while you're working on those goals.
Okay.
In addition to your action plan, I do want to give you some homework this week.
Okay.
So a big part of RT that we believe is that physical activity really helps.
Okay.
I know you mentioned earlier in your session that you like sports.
Yeah.
In regards to physical activity, in RT, as a counselor, I am allowed to disclose. For me, I love running. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I feel really helps me, zone out and kind of de-stress. Mm-hmm. What's something physical activity-wise that you can tolerate or that you enjoy doing?
Definitely don't love to run.
Okay, that's fine.
But I think I can do something, I do love to lift.
Okay.
I try to go to the gym 2 to 3 times a week, but maybe I can up that. I try to go to 4 to 5 times a week.
Okay.
Also, I know my friends just joined, an intramural football league.
Okay.
So maybe, see if they need another person on their roster and see if I can get into some games with them.
Okay.
Because I do love football.
Okay, definitely. And another big part of RT is we believe that meditation really helps, kind of that mental aspect. Have you ever done any meditation before?
I haven't. I know I have some family members that are really into it,
okay.
But I've never done it with them.
Okay.
Can you talk to me a little bit about, what I would do if I were to meditate?
Sure. So I would give you kind of some material to help you, learn a little bit more about it, some techniques that you could use. And basically what it is you taking the time to kind of self-reflect and kind of think about, the choices that you've been making and just relax and think about your life in a different way.
I'd definitely be interested in that.
Okay, so, it's a beginner level of it. Meditation is something that takes a little bit of time to get into. Mm-hmm. As with, the lifting and the intramural league physical activity, it takes a little bit of time to kind of form those healthy habits that we talked about, those positive addictions. Mm-hmm. So, in addition to your action plan, I think that maybe looking into, more lifting or seeing if your friends have a spot on the intramural league, and I'm going to give you some information about meditation to do for our next session.
Great.
How does that sound?
Awesome.
Okay, so that's the end of our session for today.
Okay.
Do you feel like this is a good place to end?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So I will see you next week.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Hi, Joe. Welcome back.
Hi.
How was your week?
Good. It's good.
Good. So as you know, this is our last session.
Uh-huh.
Previously, I did mention, about termination and that, like I mentioned, my door's always open and feel free to, make more appointments if you need to down the road.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So we're going to kind of, sorry, there's a fly. We're going to kind of recap about the homework that I gave you and our action plan. So the first thing that I kind of want to ask you was, how was the job hunt? What did you find? Any interviews? Tell me a little bit about that.
So I reached out to 2 companies. I heard back from one.
Okay.
And they want, my resume and a cover letter, by the end of next week, I think.
That's
so
great.
Kind of going through, just updating my resume, making sure my cover letter is up, making sure that's all relevant. You guys are going through that process right now.
Okay.
But I'm excited. I'm a little bummed out that only one of the 2 companies emailed me back, but, I don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll just keep in mind, you remember we talked about, I believe in our first session, that choice theory. We want to not dwell on behavior such as blaming, complaining, criticizing. Instead, we want to be accepting, and respectful and responsible. So, focusing on the good things and the positive things rather than, the negative things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. I'm very excited for you about that. Talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned the gambling that was coming up this week and your spending. What about that?
So I, kind of really wanted to gamble again on the Final Four. But when I got that urge, probably the night before, instead of gambling, I drove to the gym.
Good.
And I had a nice long workout.
That's great.
Which, it kind of popped in my head as I was opening my apps. I was like, I should be doing this. Let's go to the gym.
Right.
So I kind of see that positive addiction forming.
Okay.
Which is exciting.
Yeah.
I don't think that necessarily it's going to happen 100% of the time right now, but, I can see how it is beneficial.
Right. And, like I mentioned, it does take time for those positive addictions to kick in. The more that we do things, the more that, we're more inclined to continue doing them. But that's great, and I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah.
That kind of links into my next question in regards to your homework, talking about, you said you wanted to lift more, and then you wanted to ask about your friend's intramural league. So tell me a little bit about that.
So they did need an extra person.
That's great.
Our first game is tomorrow night.
Great.
So I'm excited, get back out on the football field.
Right.
It's something different. It's something I haven't done in a very long time. So
right.
I'm excited to get back.
Right.
Hopefully I don't get hurt.
Yeah, hopefully not. And this kind of brings into that power aspect we talked about. In our first session, we kind of uncovered that you're looking for power and fun. And by going out for these jobs and for, joining a new thing, it's giving you power in your life. It's making you feel... I don't want to speak for you, but it might make you feel that you have a purpose and that you're being recognized. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so.
And that's a big part of RT, taking charge of our situations and turning, our negative experiences into positive ones. Right. Now, the last thing I did want to mention about it, I know you were a bit hesitant about it, was the meditation. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about how that was for you. I know it's, as a beginner, it definitely takes time to get adjusted.
Really, I kind of was struggling with that a little bit. I felt that I was getting distracted very easily while I was sitting there. I was kind of sitting there, with my eyes closed and just thinking about all the other things that I had to be doing or should be doing at that time.
Right.
I also live in an apartment building. Okay. So, as I'm sitting here being quiet, I can hear the people below and above me, making noise, moving around.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to find, as they talk about, like, that Zen space or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I think with more practice, I think that it would be something I could keep doing. I just have to remember, take the time to do it. And kind of making space in my day.
Definitely.
Which, we'll see what happens.
Right. No, I totally understand. I mean, like I mentioned, in RT as a counselor, I do self-disclose when I feel like it's appropriate. When I first started meditating, it was very difficult for me, kind of the same thing, listening to all the noises, thinking about what things I had to do for the rest of the day. But with practice, it definitely does become easier. I know I gave you some information about meditation, but because, you mentioned that you were having a little bit of a difficult time, I wanted to give you some more tips if that was okay.
Yeah.
So basically, for a beginner, you want to kind of sit for a max of 3 to 5 minutes meditating. And like you said, you live in a noisy apartment complex, so there's free apps, Spotify, Pandora, either putting on maybe some white noise. That could really help.
Okay, I didn't think of that.
That's really helpful, I found. Also, guided meditation. So on those apps as well, having someone speak to you and kind of helping you focus, which might, help the mind when it tends to wander. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Also, like I mentioned, in the information I gave you last week, you want to focus on how your body is, your breaths, laying comfortably, having a relaxing environment, that Zen environment that you did mention. Sure. How does that sound?
It sounds like a good idea.
Okay, definitely. I'm very excited to hear that. So with it being our last session, kind of how do you feel about your action plan that we set together and how things are kind of progressing with that?
It's good. I think that once, if I do get a new position, I think that'll definitely help me as well. I think that's going to be a big boost for myself, especially for that, like we talked about that power aspect of my life. I think that'll be really beneficial. Because I don't know yet, I really can't establish, how I'm going to feel. But I think that it could definitely help me. And I think just even if I stop gambling for whatever reason, it's going to be beneficial in my life regardless. So, I can still watch those games and not have to bet and just be involved that way.
Right, definitely. Well, I'm very happy to hear that. Going off of what you said, that power aspect you just mentioned, I think something that you've come to realize throughout our sessions is that you're not helpless. And, you're facing the circumstances that you're under head on, and you've taken the responsibility, and the reason that you came here and you've, done your homework, gone through the goals and the action plan is because you want to make a change. And, achieving healthy, positive addictions, having fun, in a positive way is something that I really think that you're excelling in. Just keep in mind, that choice theory, that you're, the creator of your own happiness and your behaviors, and that, even when things might not seem like they're going the right way, whether they be with your, work, your intramural league, interviews, things like that, you're responsible for your behaviors and your actions, and you can't change other people. And I know that we've talked about that in our sessions before, and, making those good choices like you just mentioned about, your online gambling, that you want to satisfy your needs in a positive way. So like you said, continuing to go to the gym, like you said, these positive addictions and even this meditation, they don't happen overnight. So keep taking the time out of your day, plan ahead, make sure that you put in that time to take care of yourself.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, I think self-care is very important, and I think that you've definitely shown that through, taking the time to meditate and, just take some time to read and participate in sports and physical activities that you like. I think this is a really great place to end our sessions. How do you feel about
I
that?
feel really good. Thank you for all your help.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed our sessions.
Me too.
And yeah, if you ever need anything like I mentioned, my door is always open.
Thank you very much, Christina.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day.